In this session, we will talk about new best practices to market your e-commerce business. Our guest today will be Kenan Schledel Singh, I hope I pronounced correctly, from Quartile. And Quartile actually is sponsoring this session because this session is part of the Seller Fest online virtual event. And Quartile, which is a artificial intelligence powered advertising optimization platform, they help sellers and brand owners to maximize their potential in e-commerce. So you can find the link below to Quartile and their offer. Another company which is sponsoring this session is Carbon 6. They are a suite of tools for Amazon sellers that help to optimize and streamline every aspect of Amazon business journey. You can check the link below to check to see what software solutions they are offering. And last but not least, Getida is also part of this event, and they are Amazon FBA auditing company, and they help sellers of any size to maximize FBA reimbursements. And you can check their link below in the description as well. And this session I'm hosting together with Lisette Liss. She works with different Amazon brands and helps to host videos at Orange Click. Hi, Lisette.
Hi, Augustus. Great to be back here with you, and also invite here our another guest, Kanan. Hi. Hope you're doing great and are excited to soon be presenting for our audience.
Yes, very much so.
So before we go to your presentation, could you first give us a little bit about your background and also introduce Quartile a little bit more?
Sure. So I'm Kenan. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer here at Quartile. I've been with the company about 2 years, and we are about 4.5 years old. So, and of course, in e-com years, that feels like probably 10 times that. But before I was at Quartile, where I've worked in digital advertising and advertising technology pretty much my entire career across the programmatic and ad serving space in general. And then, I took the plunge into e-commerce specifically, again, about 2.5 years ago as the space, clearly, and I'll get to some of this in the presentation, I think, there's a dire, very extreme need for technology solutions to make this kind of ever increasingly complicated and complex and fragmented e-commerce marketplace a little bit more simple for brands and sellers. And that's what we're here to do. And I can actually, just about Quartile, because I've already got that built in to the presentation here. So as I said, we've been around about 4.5 years now, and as a SaaS based platform for advertising optimization and bid management for all major e-commerce channels. So that includes Amazon, Google, Meta, Instacart, Walmart, and some other international solutions like Flipkart and Mercado Libre. That are kind of, in the Latin American and Southeast Asian markets specifically. And we work with about 5,000 different brands in 26 countries. And we manage about $2 billion in ad spend annually and growing. So a pretty wide footprint and a lot of context into kind of what works and what doesn't work across Amazon and Walmart and the open web for direct-to-consumer channels. And I think today we're going to speak a little bit more specifically around marketplace optimization. And of course, most marketplace ad spend goes through Amazon primarily, so that'll be a larger focus of it. And what we see happening there, and what we view as some best practices to look at, both in terms of how you're managing your advertising there, but also how to look at the right technology partners to help you do that.
Yeah, perfect. We are ready to dive into the content.
So I'll just keep going. So to give you some context about our customer base, and I just bring this up just to show you. So we are a machine learning platform. And we're using data to make ad spend for our customers as efficient as possible, right? So we want to purely based on data and math, make it so that our advertising partners are spending as much as they can for top line sales and getting as efficient as they can from a ROAS standpoint. And so that works, not in any specific vertical. It's not about like, this works for consumer electronics, but not CPG and vice versa. It works across the board, right? Because it's all based on math. So you can see from our just a snapshot of kind of some of our major customers here. It spans across apparel, home goods, CPG, consumer electronics, agencies and aggregators, and everything in between. So this is going to be, sometimes I give this presentation and it's in a live environment, so people kind of shout back or raise their hands. We're virtual here, so this is more of a rhetorical question right now. But it's really, who I think maybe I'll change it into a statement. We've all seen the customer acquisition cost and cost of sale spike tremendously over the last 18 months, right? And part of that's obviously the acceleration and competition in that the pandemic brought, but a lot of it is also how Amazon and other major marketplaces have kind of changed their approach to business, right? And so just a snapshot here, this is kind of what the digital shelf looks like today on Amazon, but again, also in just about every other marketplace. And you see that almost 75% of the digital shelf is a sponsored listing, right? And so that means that competition is more sophisticated and complex and prevalent than it ever has been before. And gone are those kind of early days of marketplace advertising where you could kind of just plug in, have a great brand to sell, and kind of do some basic advertising, and you'd pull ahead of the pack. It takes a lot to separate now, and I think we all see that. Just take off your marketer hat for a second and switch to your your consumer persona, and as you do your personal searching and shopping, I think we all experience a pretty massive shift to sponsored placements on the shelves that we shop on versus just being able to shop organically. And so let's take a little bit of, let's give some context as to why. If anybody follows the earnings reports of the Amazons and the Walmarts of the world and looks at kind of what their revenue growth looks like across their business categories, you'll see that GMV growth has now, I think starting in Q3 of last year, maybe Q4, for the first time ever is flat year over year and quarter over quarter for Amazon, or close to flat, which means that in total, they're not selling much more than they were before, right? But the revenue growth is up, and the highest growing revenue category for Amazon is the services and ads business, right? So, which means that what their business model is shifting towards is kind of plateauing from a consumer purchase standpoint, and growing revenue by providing additional and quite powerful and more powerful and better advertising products to brands and sellers, and onboarding them and facilitating them to spend more in the advertising marketplaces. And just to give a snapshot of what that looks like, right? Some big numbers here, and we don't need to go through them all, but these are the advertising metrics and revenue and number of buyers and sellers that are from the first half of this year on Amazon. So you see that that those buyer and seller metrics, the buyers have kind of been pretty consistent across the marketplaces now year over year. We kind of saw that pandemic spike and everybody shifted online, and that we had a natural, I think we all expected that, kind of thought, oh well, it's going to keep growing, maybe not as much, but certain significantly. But then as we saw, thank goodness, vaccine adoption come up and regulations and constraints ease up a bit, a lot more folks are going back to brick and mortar and kind of their more traditional shopping habits. And so that number of buyers is while it's improved a lot over the last 2 years, it's now kind of back down to what the expected trend line would look like. However, there's a lot, there continues to be an influx of sellers into the marketplaces, right? And so we've seen this type of complexity before from an advertising and marketing standpoint, and particularly in my career and some of the other folks who've built Quartile. This is really this kind of prolific growth into the advertising category and the increasingly fragmented and complex nature of it as ad products get introduced into the marketplaces, as new marketplaces roll out ad products, and even just traditional retailers shifted to e-com and then open up their own advertising categories. It's increasingly complex and almost painful to even look at or try to understand. And we saw this in digital advertising probably about 10 to 15 years ago now on the other side of it, right? Where kind of in the late 90s and early 2000s, just the introduction into digital publishing and advertising was pretty simple. And then as media and consumers were more and more online, the proliferation of hundreds and thousands of ad networks and new publishers every day made it very, very complex for marketers. And I know that's not the same thing in terms of the types of marketing, but what we did see that is very similar is the adoption of buy-side technology to help simplify that and help advertisers and marketers really more effectively manage a fragmented advertising ecosystem at scale and for efficiency. And so that's all to say, like, it can be scary looking at the advertising marketplace in e-commerce now, but there's a lot of us who've seen the movie before and can help guide you through it. And so I think that what we're seeing now is, really gone are the ways of manual optimization and manual management without pretty sophisticated technology layers for bid management and optimization, as well as data and analytics platforms to help you measure your ads and understand where your consumers are shopping, et cetera. These are now table stakes, right? So like 2 or 3 years ago, it was a real nice to have, and you saw some early adopters who had big gains by leveraging technology like ours and others in the marketplaces. And now it's something that you really need to have. And so this presentation really is about kind of how to look at these partners, how to use technology to your best ability as a marketer or as a brand owner, et cetera, to make sure that you continue your growth and that your advertising investment shows a very positive return. So that being said, it's easy to, what we always find is, and what we advise our customers and potential customers to do is kind of really take a step back and understand what technology platforms have to offer within the context of your own business, right? And so we always kind of break it down, at least in our corner of the advertising world, into these categories, right? So, which is really, you almost might even just break it down into two, right? Which is people and tech. But on the tech side, we think about, there are two things that really any kind of software platform for bid management and optimization is going to provide you, which is automation and machine learning, right? And so, and these are separate things, and they get I think these terms get used interchangeably a lot, and they really shouldn't, right? So, the automation piece is really the execution layer, right? That helps to tighten up process and workflow that can be very time consuming, or in fact, a bottleneck for an organization because it's so lengthy or so complex, right? So we're talking about things like potentially campaign creation and bid updates, or even things like rules-based automation and understanding when to turn ads on and off based on stock and inventory issues, things that are largely pretty rote, but take a lot of time to do manually, right? And so, and then there's on the other side of that is the machine learning, right, which is the brain of it, right? This is the AI or the algorithms that are looking at the data, understanding what those data points mean for specific brands, for specific products, or even specific outcomes and KPIs that are needed for specific products, and recommending the right execution, right? So in the context of, just to kind of give a simple example here, this is, all right, the algorithm's looking at for a specific product, what are the most, efficient keywords across or targeting or other targeting parameters across specific advertising placements for specific hours of the day, and what is the optimal bid rate that is going to result in the highest number of conversions across those hours at the lowest cost possible, right? And understanding that data and then putting it in front of you so that you can make decisions around executing an ad spend. And the other piece is the people equation, right? Which I think gets largely a lot of times underserviced in this market, right? Because picking a software platform seems pretty straightforward, but a lot of times you have to take into account like who's going to be using the platform, right? Is this something that you as a business, you've got a big marketing team and experienced ad tech operators, and they understand how to work in these platforms and can go through a training and start executing on their own. Then you can, you don't necessarily need to look for a big customer success team. Or if you're, maybe a smaller brand or a smaller seller and you don't have a big marketing team and you say, look, I really want software like this, but I need someone to operate it for me. Does that provider have a customer success team that can be the hands and keyboard layer for you for execution and kind of take your strategy and translate that into the tactical execution in the platform? And data science and analytics, right? Is this, the same exact conversation, right? Do you have folks in-house that can ingest the data and the reporting and understand what that means strategically from a business and translate those into insights around products and consumer behavior and consumer interest and things like that? Or do you need that from a partner, right? And so it's important to kind of analyze what the offering is in addition to just the software from a certain provider and pair that up with your business and your specific business needs so that you're really able, you're not stuck in a position where you've bought really good tech, but you don't have the capacity to operate it. Or you've bought a really good tech, but you don't have access to operate it yourself and you want to, right? So those are kind of the four big key areas to look at and evaluate as you're looking for a partner. So let's dive into the tech side of it a little bit more, right? Let's talk about what's important when you're evaluating a software platform that's leveraging machine learning, particularly in the e-commerce space, right? And we say here that, AI isn't created equal, right? It's the amount of data, the speed of which that data flows through a platform, and the diversity of that data are incredibly important and very impactful. So, it's a lot of times you'll see advertisers in the space kind of gravitate towards, I want a boutique platform or service that, I'm the top client, and they'll pay the most attention to me, and that's I feel like I'll get better performance that way. And certainly if you need a high level of service, you want a high level of service, but generally if you're looking for a partner that is very small from a technology standpoint in terms of number of customers and platforms that they operate with, the performance is going to suffer greatly, right? Because if any kind of machine learning technology or any algorithm deployed within a software platform doesn't see a lot of data, it's not going to get you a lot of results. So these things really, really matter. And kind of to that end as well, the way that, the methodology through which the optimization in the machine, in any kind of machine learning provider, through the methodology through which they deploy that is incredibly important as well, right? So this is something that we talk about all the time, right? Which is if you really want to be able to act most intelligently on all the data that your customers create and your prospects create as they shop online, you need to be leveraging technology that isolates variables as granularly as possible to give you insights from that and collect actionable outcomes from that, and then also that can optimize as frequently as possible, right? And so this is another reason, why, kind of another just reason why this tech is becoming table stakes, is because if you think about it in terms of the amount of data points now that the average brand on Amazon generates, it's almost unimaginable to to the human brain in terms of being able to process it, right? So you see all these different things that are being, all these different data points that are being collected across just Amazon alone, right? And then if you think about these in terms of your average Amazon seller that has about 40 to 50 ASINs, this is 100 octillion different unique data combinations that occur every single day, right? So you really do need software that can adequately translate that into insights for you, because there is no John Henry that's going to outrace the machine on this one, right? And so that's really kind of how it comes together. And so then as you think about these things in terms of automation and machine learning and the service partners therein, you really do want to start to search for partners that align with you from a product and feature standpoint, a geo standpoint in terms of like the locations that you're selling in and what marketplaces and channels really matter for you there, and align with the ones that are most closely align with the ones that are most closely aligned with you, right? Meaning, if you're really Amazon focused, you want to pick a partner that is going to have all the access to early beta programs through Amazon, or additional features, or can help you get additional support. Same thing with Walmart or Flipkart or Mercado Libre, or if you're a D2C first seller, in your, depending on what platform or infrastructure you're built on, whether it's Shopify or BigCommerce or Cart or any of those, you want to make sure that whoever you're working with from an advertising perspective is also really aligned with those platforms. And I'll show you why that's important. So I think maybe we all saw the big announcement last week with the Amazon marketing stream. We were a part of that, thank goodness. And now that is, what that really translates into is the ability to do data-based hourly bidding on Amazon. And it's still in beta. They announced the beta, but how that came to be was actually last April is when they opened it up as a private beta to Ads API partners. And so we plugged into that last April. We launched it for our customers last July. And so what you see there then is a 9-month cycle where any of our customers on Amazon were able to get access to hourly bidding and hourly optimization based on actual conversion data 9 months ahead of the general market, right? And so that's incredibly important. If Amazon's your primary marketplace, and this rollout was specifically around U.S. alone. So if selling on Amazon in the U.S. is where the largest percentage of your sales come from, it's really critical to align with a partner that's going to have access to that. And to talk about hourly bidding a little bit more and why that's really important, as you can see here on this graph. The different colored dots are different days of the week, and the plot points are different hours of the day. And so some of that stuff is really obvious, right? As you might imagine, people are shopping more when they're awake than when they're asleep. But then if you look a little bit closer, you'll see that certain hours of the day on certain days of the week way outperform the norm, and some way underperform the norm. And if you're not leveraging this type of data to inform your bid strategy, you're going to lose out on a ton of top line sales, and you're going to waste a lot of money otherwise. So it's a worst of all worlds scenario if you're not using this, because you're essentially spending more and getting less than you should, right? And it's also very important to adopt these types of products, advertising products, early, because if we have this conversation in 6 months, more than likely all of your competitors are going to already be doing this. Right. So it's really, and this is one example, but this happens every year. There's always, several new updates. You saw Walmart finally switch from a first price to a second price auction. These guys are always improving their advertising products. And the earlier you can jump on those and figure out, the better your life is going to be as a seller or a brand. And so to give some examples here too, just specifically, why this really matters, right? So, you see the bid variation we like to use this one because it's a coffee brand versus a sleep aid brand, right? So you've got, consumer behavior is very different by hour of the day for both of those things, right? And so it's important to take that into account. If you're just bidding, doing a flat bid for a certain keyword or campaign across, the entire day, or worse, you don't update it even weekly or monthly, again, you're going to be wildly inefficient relative to where you should be. And so again, to give you some context there, just to wrap this up, this is the yearly impact, right? So if you're changing your bids once a week, that's 52 bid changes a year, once a day. Obviously, that's 365. But if you're doing hourly bidding, that's nearly 9,000 bid adjustments to get more efficient every single year. So it's really, really impactful. And then you'll see that, these are some of the things that are coming down the road in terms of even just search targeting, right? So we're opening it up to geolocation, specific devices, and other demographics, gender, age group, etc. And so again, I'd like to talk a little bit about why it matters. We talked about kind of, going granular across targeting and frequency of optimization, but also where the ads are showing within Amazon, right? It's really critically important as we see that, I think it's very obvious that the top of search is always going to overperform, but you can also by hour of the day find those pockets where rest of search or detail page is actually very efficient. And so you don't want to just kind of oversell yourself on top of search. We can find those areas that are going to be efficient for you otherwise. So I want to talk a little bit also from a feature standpoint about margin, because I think everybody's concerned about that as well. So one thing that we're seeing open up across the marketplace is Amazon has rolled out a lot of this data. Walmart has as well, and we're seeing it across some other marketplaces coming too, is through the Ads API, you can actually get a lot of the cost data that you might not normally associate with advertising, but it's really critical to how you advertise, right? So when you look at these things, and apologies that they're not specifically labeled here, but a lot of times people just use ACoS or ROAS as a metric for how they want to, where they're comfortable in ad spend at the product level or at the advertiser level. But you can actually ingest a lot of the other cost data from these platforms that should inform kind of how you want to spend your advertising dollars and where you want to spend them, right? And so when you look at what is also available that can be then ingested into your advertising reports is, what are your, down to the product level, what are your shipping costs? What are your storage costs if you're, fulfilled by Amazon? What are your gift wraps and exchange costs? What are your specific Amazon referral costs? Because now those are changing, with a little bit more liquidity than they have historically. And so we're starting to see, we've rolled out an ability to report back on that down to the SKU level, and then also start to optimize against that, right? So instead of setting a specific ACoS target for a product or for your account, you can start to select a specific margin target that pulls in all that data, and then kind of cost of goods shipped, so to speak, to Amazon. If we collect that from the seller or advertiser themselves, we can plug that in. Then you have a very real margin metric, which is incredibly important right now when costs and supply chains and with costs, supply chain and inflation problems, to be able to keep an eye on that and have that inform your advertising spend is really, really critical. And we're at the point now where ourselves and a lot of other tech platforms can enable this for you. And so it's really important to be looking at that and making sure you're taking advantage of what's on the market. I think the other thing is just diversification, right? So, you might think of diversification as like, oh, I need to be in every marketplace. And I would say that's not the right approach. I think how we always work with our customers and how we see them being the most successful is a really deliberate and methodical approach to where they're selling and where they're advertising. So these are kind of two different things, right? So when you think about what marketplaces to be in, it's, where are your customers buying, right? And both geographically and in, what marketplaces are they buying in? Are they buying on Walmart more, or are they really just, is it really just kind of an Amazon audience, et cetera? And then what geographic markets, right? And don't feel like you automatically need to sell in certain markets just because you believe you should be there or because your Amazon rep is trying to get you to expand internationally. Really think about where your purchasers come from. On the other side of that is like where how do your buyers search for you? How do your customers search for products? And so even if you're just selling on Amazon, how do you want to control for customers who start their kind of product discovery journey on Google? And you see this, ever-growing metric of the number of product searches on Google that contain the word Amazon. And part of that's because the digital shelf is so crowded now with sponsored results on Amazon that a lot of buyers prefer to search for a certain product, even though they want to buy it on Amazon. They'll start that search journey on Google. And so it's important to be able to meet them there at that point in the purchase journey and drive them to where you want them to purchase. And so just, and again, like being able to optimize and use the data that you see on Amazon and apply that to Google and vice versa is really, really critical. And, we always see that as brands grow and scale, the most successful ones are the ones who can really effectively look at their channel mix and optimize across that and understand when they should be putting more money into one channel and less money into the other, and using the data and results that they see across every channel to inform every channel. Sorry, went back there. All right. And so, lastly, make sure when you're looking at these providers that they're representative of where your customers are, where your customers are buying, and also where they're in market and looking for, product consideration and things like that. And that these the platform for you is the one that's going to be able to cover that, optimize across the entire piece, give you the data and insights all in one place for each individual channel and then at large. So I know I went a couple minutes over. I tried to cut this down and go back, but there we are. And thank you for tuning in. I'm happy to answer any questions now. If you'd like to get in touch, you can always just email sales@Quartile or myself. I'm just Keenan@quartile.com. And I'm sure that the gang here has a lot of different links that you can click through as well.
Yeah. Thank you so much for very interesting presentation. I think to have better insights how this automated thing influences Amazon sellers and overall e-commerce. So very good. And if the viewers enjoyed the presentation as well, then definitely don't forget to like this video.
And you will find the links below to Quartile. And this session is actually part of Seller Fest online virtual event where we invited 25 experts to share free content like this, what you have listened from Kenan at the moment. But additionally, every expert, we also asked to bring us extra content, extra video, which we call VIP, and we packaged it into a VIP package. And every video which you see here on the screen, or if you follow the link below in the description, you can get access to only if you upgrade. And among the videos, you will get like different step-by-step guides, worksheets, PDF downloads, which can be a checklist, for example, a PPC checklist for Prime Day. And also someone from Quartile is, I'm just searching for that segment. Eduardo from Quartile also shared with us a video in the VIP section. I don't know if Kenan, you're aware what he was sharing, but I know that it was like advanced techniques about PPC and DSP.
Yes. So Eduardo he is one of our co-founders and is probably our foremost expert on actual kind of management tactics and strategy. And so he put together kind of a deep dive on, I mentioned some of the things that he'll probably talk about in more depth during his session, but really how to leverage these as a seller or a brand, Amazon features, and how to control the technology platform for best results. And I think more specifically around the Amazon DSP and some of the audience targeting and new to brand functionality.
Yes. And
if you're a pro, that's the session for you.
Yeah, cool. Thanks. Yeah, and if you want to get access to it, you will find the link below in the description. And now we have a couple of questions to follow up your discussion. Yeah, let's take the first one. So you emphasized a lot artificial intelligence and softwares. Can you give us like pros and cons? Because I know that there are some people specializing in providing advertising and managing services as a human without any automations. Like, what's the pros and cons? What do you think?
Yeah, so I mean, I think that it's important to remember that with any of these platforms, us or anyone else, AI and machine learning is not a replacement for strategy. And I think that sometimes there's that misperception that it is, and sometimes that misrepresentation by companies like us that maybe it is, and that you should be looking at it that way. So, when you think about ad tech platforms in any space, but especially in e-com, this is the execution layer, right? This is, and what we try to emphasize is that we built a technology around how these advertising ecosystems work and how to best optimize across them. And so we know the most about that, and our technology is built around running that optimally. No one knows more about your products or your brand, or frankly your customers than you, right? And so, and this kind of gets back to what I was saying earlier. Is like, we're there to give you the tools to find your best success and the tools to bring in data and insights from that. We have a service layer to help with that, and help translate a lot of those things. But again, the technology is never a replacement for strategy. It's just the ultimate execution of that strategy. And so I'd say those are the pros and cons therein. And what I would tell you is that there's at this juncture, there's no kind of management solution that's only a guy, or someone sitting in front of a Seller Central console and doing manual management that is ever going to be as successful as it could be. But if you're just looking for, there is no technology that you can just hit a button and turn on and forget about it that is going to be as effective as it could be. What you need to do is pair the right the right personnel with the right technology. That's how you get to where you want to be, right? So, and in fact, you see a lot of these agencies do use, we're the kind of technology layer for a lot of agencies in the space. There are a lot of other companies like us that execute in similar fashion. So generally the best agency partners you're going to work with are using a technology partner, and they're pairing that expertise with the right tech. And that's ultimately where you want to be.
Okay, thanks. Makes sense.
Yeah, let's take another one. So how does the software understand what my product is and what are the most relevant keywords for it?
Right. So the data that we see is at large all of the conversion data organically and from advertising. And so what happens is that we see the conversion data for organic search terms as well as the ad driven ones at for every single ASIN in every single placement for every hour of the day, right? And so then what you see from an advertising standpoint is the automation telling you what the optimal bid rate is based on the data that we see from the ads. And then as we see organic conversions come in for specific ASINs and similar and adjacent ASINs that are, reach that statistical threshold where we know that it's not an outlier, and it's, these are actually terms that people are using to find your product or your type of products in that category or subcategory, then those get added into additional campaigns, and we start spending and finding the efficiencies there. So what you find, some interesting things that we always see is, because it's just data, right? And we're just seeing we are just looking at what actually works. So we're not just guessing based on, I think that, I think that my pizza dough is going to be my gluten-free pizza dough is going to be really popular with people who are searching for cheese or something like that, right? It's not that. It's just based on what we see. And so there's always interesting things that come up for every brand we start working with, particularly in different markets. I mean, one thing that was surprising to a lot of us about 2 years ago for some customers of ours selling in Amazon Japan, was that we started to see an incredibly high organic conversion rate for Chinese language searches for these products. And I remember like we started we started seeing them, and we were starting to the platform was recommending that we had campaigns for those, and the clients were like, wait a minute, no way, like this is Amazon Japan, this has got to be some sort of error. But it was like that specific product, native Chinese speakers living in Japan really liked it, and so they were searching for it in Chinese, and so we were able to capture some really, really efficient conversions because we added that in there. And you see that, you see different versions of that story for every single product we work, or for every single brand we work with, where because we're just looking at the data, we're not really biased around those types of things that you find high converting items that you don't expect. But also, to answer your question more specifically, that's something anytime we onboard a new customer, we look at all the historical data and we see what's working, but we also have that conversation of like, you as a marketer, are you launching new products and that like, hey, this is really similar to this other product that I've sold, and I know that these search terms really work well for it. And, we can always manually kickstart it and add those in. So again, we kind of pair that strategic knowledge of a customer has with the learnings that we get from the data and bring that together as effectively as we can.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Kenan. And once again, the link you will find below in the description for Quartile. If you would like to sign up, I think there is like a offer from them as well. What was on your first slide? It's the world's largest.
We're the world's largest e-com advertising platform.
Yeah, advertising platform. Well, it's not the platform where you show ads.
Yeah,
but the platform.
We're the software that connects it. So that's we consider ourselves that platform, not the marketplace itself. No.
Yeah, cool. All right, thank you very much, and good luck in your business. Bye bye.
Thanks so much for having me, guys.
Bye.
Bye bye.
Bye, Lisette. And now I would like to invite you to watch other video where Amy Wies is explaining easy funnels you can build to grow your brand outside Amazon.